Colossians chapter 3, this will just be a mini sermon with the time that we have left. I'm returning once again to the topic of grace. If you'll remember, grace at its root has its idea of any of the gifts that a gracious, benevolent God gives. That's what grace is. He's given us so much in salvation, but the focus of my study has been after that. What does God's grace look like in our sanctification? We've studied several passages just telling us how much grace he's given to us. It's abundant, okay? We're like fish swimming in grace, right? We talked about the verse, he has given us all sufficiency for all things, for all times, for every good work. He's given us so much grace, especially in our weakness. But we transitioned at a point kind of in that series to where God does not just pour grace into us to be a vacuum. He intends to give us grace so that we are means of grace to others. We're supposed to be givers of grace, and God actually promises to give more grace to those who intend to be givers of grace. And specifically, God has given us unique gifts specific to us that are different than anybody else. Remember the verse, we are instructed to be good stewards of God's varied grace. And there's a way that you are gifted, that God has given you grace, that he's not given to anybody else, and you're supposed to steward that for others. So how else, then, does God expect that we be givers of grace? Well, look with me at Colossians chapter 3, verses 1 through 13. And as we read, notice the new community that God is creating. Colossians chapter 3, this is verse 1. If then you have been raised with Christ, seek the things that are above, where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Set your minds on things that are above, not on things that are on earth. For you have died, and your life is hidden with Christ in God. When Christ, who is your life, appears, then you will also appear with him in glory. Put to death, therefore, what is earthly in you: sexual immorality, impurity, passion, evil desire, and covetousness, which is idolatry. On account of these, the wrath of God is coming. In these you too once walked when you were living in them, but now you must put them all away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, and obscene talk from your mouth. Do not lie to one another, seeing that you have put off the old self with its practices and have put on the new self, which is being renewed in knowledge after the image of its creator. Here there is not Greek and Jew, circumcised and uncircumcised, barbarian, Scythian, slave and free, but Christ is all and in all. Put on, therefore, as God's chosen ones, holy and beloved, compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, and patience, bearing with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgiving each other, as the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive. We'll be focusing mostly on verses 12 and 13 of this passage. But even as you look at those two verses, verses 12 and 13, where's the word grace? It's actually in there multiple times, but it's hiding in the word forgiveness. So the word forgiveness actually has the same root as the word grace in it. Okay, so the word forgiveness in the Bible carries the idea of release, releasing a debt. Okay, maybe you've heard that. But there's also a sense in which this word forgiveness is somewhat tied to our English word. There's the word give in forgiveness. Okay, there's something that you're giving. There's a generosity there. There's a graciousness to forgiveness. Okay, and that is some of what is tied up in the idea of forgiveness. So instead of calculating when you're wronged what the perpetrator deserves, instead of making that calculation and getting revenge, I'm going to be gracious. I'm going to forgive the debt. That is some of the idea in forgiveness that is closely tied with the idea of grace. And this idea, this attitude of forgiveness, should distinguish the Christian community from any other culture, especially the secular society that we live in. So in order to create a forgiving community, we must understand why forgiveness is unique, what it means, and how it is possible. Looks like my PowerPoints did not make it in there, but that's all right. So my 3 points are why forgiveness is unique, what it means, and how it is possible. Amber Geiger was walking home to her apartment in Dallas, Texas, after her shift as a patrol officer ended late at night. She mistakenly walked up the stairs to the wrong floor and then into the wrong apartment, thinking it was her own. A man named Botham Jean was there watching TV in his living room, but Amber, thinking that Botham was an intruder in her apartment, shot him and later was indicted for murder. But immediately after the sentencing, Botham's brother, his name is Brant, extended forgiveness to Amber. And in a very touching moment in the middle of the trial, right there in the courtroom, Botham and Amber embraced in a graphic display of forgiveness. But some people were actually outraged at this forgiveness. Some people thought this was dehumanizing and actually insulting. Kevin Powell was one of those men who wrote an article in Progressive Magazine, and he said this: America should ask black people forgiveness for habitually expecting us to forgive these murders. Racism and white supremacy are alive and well in our system, and no amount of hugs spreading virally will erase that fact. Collectively, our love and forgiveness must also be tied to a clear understanding that those we offer it to need to repent, atone, and permanently change. Otherwise, we are just wasting that love and forgiveness and actually wounding ourselves again and again and again. And that sentiment about forgiveness just not being enough, or even maybe not even being appropriate, is shared by many groups, especially activist groups, maybe like Black Lives Matter or even the Me Too movement. Now, I understand there's issues of justice going on here, and we don't have time to get into all of those dynamics in this sermon, but I'm just pointing out how our culture loves to be outraged at injustice. And when it comes to any of these social issues, there's just this anger, this overflow, and the idea of forgiveness is repulsive to them. Forgiveness is seen as a strategy to help abusers escape responsibility and avoid accountability. This lack of forgiveness can also be seen, and maybe you've heard the term cancel culture. Okay, have you guys heard that? Basically, the idea if anybody utters language that is provocative or triggering or victimizing language, they are canceled, okay? They're ignored. They're not to be engaged in any way or even looked at. Forgiveness only cuts short the opportunity for victims in that sense to find honor. All right, so that is our culture. In the name of justice, a lot of our culture just desires to make people atone for their sins, kind of like the community that Paul is addressing here in Colossians when he says, hey, put these things away: anger, wrath, malice, slander, obscene talk from your mouth. Think with me for a second. What would life be like without forgiveness? Like, try to imagine a life, imagine this earth without forgiveness. What if parents canceled their children at their first mistake? What if students were canceled by their teachers at their first mistake? What if God canceled you at your first mistake? What if he wanted nothing to do with you after your first mistake? I think of Adam and Eve and what life would have been like. I mean, that's the curse without any promise of forgiveness. That's a world in which forgiveness does not exist, where God does not exist. But I think, as we'll see, without forgiveness, communities break down and have no clear path forward. These are sticky issues of justice, forgiveness, revenge. With the amount of time we have left, we don't have time to get into all of that. But I just want to make the point that our culture currently is struggling with these kind of issues, so there is nothing more that can distinguish us as a Christian community than forgiveness. I can't think of a word that distinguishes our religion and our community, our culture, any more than maybe that sole idea of forgiveness. So contrast much of that modern culture with a culture built on Jesus' teaching. It was Monday, October 2nd, 2006, in Nickel Mines, Pennsylvania. A 32-year-old milk truck driver lived locally there in Nickel Mines with his family. He was not Amish, but his milk truck pickup route, led him to many of these Amish farms. He was a quiet man. He was known for just kind of methodically doing his route, going about his business. But on that Monday, he lost all reason and barged into a one-room schoolhouse and shot 10 little Amish girls. He killed 5 of them and wounded the other 5 before turning the gun on himself. Although the Amish families were grieving appropriately in response to this tragedy, they never sought revenge. Instead, within hours of the event, they publicly forgave the gunman. Several Amish leaders visited the grieving family of the gunman to offer comfort and assurance of their forgiveness. Half of those at the gunman's funeral were Amish, and they in turn invited the gunman's family to attend the little girl's funeral as well. There was even a charitable fund set up for the families of the injured or deceased little girls, but those families decided to share the fund with the shooter's widow and children. And the milkman's family wrote this letter to the public. To our Amish friends, neighbors, and local community, our family wants each of you to know that we are overwhelmed by the forgiveness, grace, and mercy that you've extended to us. Your love for our family has helped to provide the healing we so desperately need. The prayers, flowers, cards, and gifts you've given have touched our hearts in a way no words can describe. Your compassion has reached beyond our family, beyond our community, and is changing our world, and for this we sincerely thank you. Contrast that culture with much of our outraged modern culture, with a sense of self-realization and entitlement popular in such of our American culture. And then you have the Amish, who prize self-denial and forgiveness. And I realize we don't agree with everything with the Amish, but on that note, they're built like us on scriptural principles of forgiveness. They would not let the bitter root of hate poison the community. They modeled what Colossians also says there: compassionate hearts, kindness, humility, meekness, patience, and forgiveness. So then, what is forgiveness? We've had these contrasting cultures, but if we can, with the time we have, how do we boil down forgiveness? Multiple things, but Colossians chapter 13 says we are to bear with one another, and if anyone has a complaint against another, forgiving each other. So first, I want you to see that forgiveness is unnatural. Okay, this is a high bar that is set. It does not come naturally to our culture. It does not come naturally to any of us. Our natural tendency is to respond in revenge, stand up for justice. We think of ourselves as righteous in doing that. So we must begin by recognizing that God, the Holy Spirit, has to produce this supernatural work in us to be forgiving. So forgiveness is unnatural, but forgiveness also identifies with the wrongdoer as a fellow sinner. So forgiveness, in order to forgive, you have to identify with the wrongdoer as a fellow sinner. If we were to forgive, we can easily fall into the trap of forgiving out of a self-righteous sense of mercy, right? We take the moral high ground in our pride. We'll say, okay, yeah, I'll forgive you, but I'm going to let you know exactly how much that hurt me, how much that made me felt, how evil that was, and so then, therefore, I feel better about myself and I'm putting somebody else down. There's kind of this condescending attitude. But if true forgiveness is going to happen, it's going to be because we identified with the wrongdoer. We're fellow sinners. The same thing in you is the same thing in me. I'm made of the same stuff. Forgiveness is also naming the wrong as indeed wrong and punishable. which is only possible if you've done the first step, right? Okay, if you've gotten rid of the self-righteousness in you, if you've humbled yourself, said, hey, we're made of the same stuff, forgiveness doesn't gloss over sin. It looks at it bare in the face and says, I'm going to absorb the cost. That is forgiveness. It's not excusing with it. That's not Jesus' forgiveness. He looked at the cost in the face and chose to bear it himself. Forgiveness also absorbs the debt then, okay? Forgiveness often is used in terms of debt and money. So forgiveness absorbs the debt. When someone sins against you, it feels like they owe you, right? It feels like they're obligated to pay something, to pay a debt. So for example, there was one time I was at Bob Jones, and my car is parked in the parking lot where it always is, and some guys run into my room and tell me, I think we hit your car. I go out there, and there's a big Ford F-150 that was trying to back up, and I think it wasn't too bad, but had clipped the corner of my car, my old RAV, the green one. Now, this guy, I knew this guy. He's a good guy. I worked with him. He was also getting married like that summer. So my heart went out to him. I'm like, okay, this is a 98 RAV with like 300,000 miles on it. So like, it's really that good deal. In that case, I decided like, hey, I'm not going to make you fix this or pay for it or anything. That was kind of like a debt I forgave. But in that sense, does that mean it goes away? No, it means I absorbed the cost of that. It means I drove around the rest of the life of that car with a rusty, nasty dent in the back that was from the guy hitting it. And it's the same for you to forgive. If you choose to forgive, there's no glossing over it. There's no diminishing it. Forgiveness is hard. It means I'm going to bear the cost of that. It means I'm going to almost voluntarily suffer. Either you get revenge and make them pay, or you say, either you suffer or I suffer. Forgiveness is saying, I'm going to suffer. I'm going to bear the cost of that. Forgiveness is also giving up the right to revenge, then. A definition of revenge is this: just plainly being satisfied with someone else's unhappiness, okay? Someone else did something to me. Instead of absorbing that cost, I'm going to make them slowly work the debt off until I'm satisfied. And that's revenge. So that could be something overt, like hurting the person directly, or yelling at them, but often it's subtle forms of exacting payment like these. I would encourage us not to rehash the past over and over to them. That's not forgiveness. Don't single them out for harsher, more demanding treatment because they still owe you. There's plenty of ways to single them out. Don't act with self-righteous mercy to make them feel small. Don't avoid, ignore, or give them the cold shoulder in the little moments. Don't cancel them, right? Don't belittle them in the eyes of others in the name of warning people about them. We have to be careful of that, right? Especially in a community. Oh, I'm just warning others. But in doing that, we're belittling their reputation, and that can be a form of revenge. Don't belittle them to others in the name of finding support, sharing your heart, and venting. A lot of revenge is done in the name of venting. I'll be honest, in our Christian communities, sometimes this takes the name of a prayer request, right? A prayer request. And let me tell you about what happened, and just making them pay a little bit more. That's not forgiveness. Don't replay the videos of the hurt in your imagination, right? That's one thing. That one got me, right? I'm a more of an introvert, I process things, and those things just can process over and over again, just replay. Sometimes we choose to replay them over and over again because we want that sense of hurt to be fresh. We want to be outraged. We don't want to let it go because that's not just. But that's not forgiveness. Don't demonize them in your imagination. Remember the common sinful humanity that you share with them, and then don't root for them to fail. All right, so that's how not to get revenge, okay? Forgiveness is giving up that right. I give up the right to get revenge. Revenge is not mine. Revenge is the Lord's. Forgiveness is also granted before it is felt, okay? It's granted before it's felt. You may not feel like forgiving. We often don't right away. But you can grant forgiveness before you feel it. And often that's what has to happen and should happen first, and then the feelings may or may not come afterward. But inner forgiveness is not dependent on others, and that is your responsibility. You must forgive others, get it right in your own heart. But forgiveness is also like a credit card. Think about if I absorb a debt, put it on my credit card. I still have to make payments on that credit, right? So even after the moment that I chose to forgive, and I said, yes, I will absorb the debt, I'm still making payments on that. And isn't that often how forgiveness feels? You chose to forgive them, but they show back up in your life, and you're going to have to make that choice again. I'm going to make another payment. I'm going to choose to forgive. I'm going to pay off that debt a little more. I'm not going to give in to the temptation to make them pay. Forgiveness is open to reconciliation. True forgiveness is always open to reconciliation. This may not mean that the relationship is fully regaining trust. Boundaries may have to be put in place. But true forgiveness is always open to restoring the relationship. And then finally, forgiveness may involve confrontation even. It'd be easier with forgiveness just to be done with it. That's what we want sometimes. Like, I just want to be done with it. I don't want to see the person. I'm just done, right? But true biblical forgiveness actually looks out for that person's soul. Not only seeking for reconciliation with that relationship, but also isn't content with the evil still lying in their heart. It's not good for them. It's not loving for the community that we all exist in. It's not loving to God. All right, that is not forgiveness. So sometimes forgiveness even means calling out the evil inside of them, even when you've forgiven the person. All right, this is unnatural. This is a tall order. How is this possible? All right, you think about that whole list I gave you of all the things that forgiveness means and can be, and we're just getting started. That's a lot. Forgiveness is unnatural. So how is it possible? Verse 13 says, "As the Lord has forgiven you, so you also must forgive." Forgiveness is only possible if you recognize your emotional poverty and your emotional wealth. So first, your emotional poverty. You can only stay bitter if you feel superior. You can only stay bitter if you feel superior. Deep down, it's very tempting to think, I would never do something like that. Maybe we forgive the things that are kind of understandable, relatable, but the times that we really have a hard time forgiving are the times that we're feeling, I would never do something like that. And when we put ourselves on that pedestal, that's when we're going to have the hardest time to forgive. But the fact is, we all are hiding something. What if every thought you had this week could be put up here, captured, and played on the projector for us all to see? How would that make you feel? That would be terrifying. It'd be embarrassing. But why? If we had nothing to hide, we'd have nothing to fear. Let's be honest then. We all have something to hide. We'd be mortified if everyone truly knew what was on the inside. Adam and Eve tried to hide what was on the inside with fig leaves. So let me ask you, what are your fig leaves? How are you trying to cover up? Are you overworking to be successful? Are you not able to say no to anyone? You're a people pleaser. Are you unattached to people without any real relationships because you're afraid of being known to that level? Are you a perpetual victim, just blaming others? You want to get people off your back and focus on others so that focus isn't on me? Are you passionate about relativism? I define my own morals, so, that's good for you, but that's not for me. Are you too religious and moralistic and self-righteous because it's some of a front that you're putting on to hide what's going on underneath? Do you gossip about others to make them look worse, to make you feel better about yourself? Are you perfectionistic? Are you holding on to things, like holding on to your youth or something? Do you have a desperate need for approval? These are fig leaves. Think about constructing an outfit of fig leaves, sewing them all together, patching them all around yourself. The sad fact is those things are kind of brittle and they're going to fall apart, leaving you exposed. That's true of any fig leaf that you're constructing for yourself. Anything you're doing to put on a front before, especially God, but honestly before people too, we see through it. People see through it. And it leaves us exposed. So are you pretending that you're better than anyone else? Are you trying to take the moral high ground? Is there anything in you that says, I would never do something like that? Or have you come to grips with your own sinful humanity? The only way that you will be able to forgive is if you see yourself in the worst of sinners, if you have true emotional inner poverty. Can you say, I am Judas who betrayed Jesus? I am the soldiers who beat him. I am the Romans who crucified him. I am the Jews who rejected him. Or is your sense, your reaction, I would never do something like that? If we're truly in touch with our humanity, we recognize we are the same, made of the same stuff as these people. At the same time, forgiveness is also only possible if on the cross you see Jesus, the most superior human being who ever lived, hanging on a cross, praying for you, one of his greatest enemies, saying, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. You are forgiven. And as Colossians 3:12 says, you are God's chosen ones. You're holy. You're beloved. God chose you to experience his love. That's what makes you different than anybody else. Not because you're better or wouldn't do these bad things that other people do. Okay, that's not it. You are rich. He's set you apart for a unique purpose to be part of a unique community in the world that is distinguished from our unforgiving, outraged society. That is his intention for you. And it is to the extent that you are in touch with both your spiritual poverty and your spiritual wealth that you will be able to forgive. If you don't know the riches of Christ's love and forgiveness, you're going to be too needy and insecure. You won't be living like you are rich. You'll be living like you're poor. If you're living like you're poor, you will have nothing to give. You will have no means to absorb debt and to be graciously giving. You won't be a forgiving person if you don't have the riches of Christ. But if you've experienced Christ's forgiveness, then the amount of hurt that you can experience from people is limited. No matter what people do to me, they can't actually touch my true wealth. And that is how we are enriched by grace. We have so much grace, especially in forgiveness. If you know Christ's grace in forgiveness, then you will also be able to extend grace in forgiveness. Let's pray.